Welcome to the deep dive. We're doing what we do best here, really zeroing in on a fascinating piece of material you shared with us.
Hmm.
And today, our whole focus really is locked onto Chapter 2 of M. Holloway's dissertation.
That's right, Chapter 2, and the title is Let's Do It, Broadway Beckons. Even that, well, it hints at the ambition, the drive we're going to be looking at in Cole Porter's early career.
Exactly. Yeah, and we know the overall dissertation touches on Broadway Porter, early Hollywood, gays and musicals, innuendo, all that, Tin Pan Alley,
Indeed, a
censorship.
lot of related themes.
But for this deep dive, our mission is super clear. Just understand Porter's path towards Broadway, as it's shown in this specific chapter, Chapter 2 only.
And like you said, that title, Let's Do It, it just feels purposeful, doesn't it? Sets the tone for the proactive steps he was taking, which this chapter really digs into.
Okay, so let's do it then. Chapter 2 kicks off with Porter's time at Yale. That's
Yeah.
what, 1909 to 1913?
Or that's the period.
Sounds like these were, well, incredibly formative years,
Hmm.
really laying the groundwork, according to this chapter.
Absolutely. It seems, despite being young and apparently wearing these, quote, outlandish clothes, his mother picked.
Oh, okay.
He found, real social success there. And interestingly, the chapter links that success mostly to his musical talent, which was clearly blossoming during these college years.
Blossoming might be putting it mildly.
Yeah.
The chapter says he was incredibly productive,
Hmm.
writing songs for the Yale Dramatic Association, even like alumni groups.
Constantly writing. He was clearly cultivating his craft, building a reputation right there on campus. That's a big focus in this section of the chapter.
And he was involved in things like T&B, a club.
Yeah, T&B. They studied librettos, comic operas, so he was really getting into the nuts and bolts of musical theater structure,
Okay.
Plus, the chapter mentions he was in all the social clubs, so very active socially, which seems kind of central to his development during this period as the chapter presents it.
And the output. Between 1911 and 1913, Chapter 2 lists 4 musical comedies he wrote scores for. Cora and the Villain, Still Pursued Her,
Right.
The Pot of Gold, and The Kaleidoscope. Just the titles kind of give you a flavor of the time, don't they, within this Yale context?
They do. And while the chapter does note the plots were maybe slight and incidental,
Okay.
it also points out, crucially, that Porter made sure he performed some of the best songs himself.
Ah, smart.
Yeah.
Showcasing his own work.
Exactly. Honing his performance skills, getting his stuff out there to his peers. It was all part of the process described in Chapter 2.
And the chapter also talks about his exposure through, like, the Glee Club, banjo, mandolin clubs, campus concerts, tours. That must have been invaluable for developing his sense of timing, performance, even mimicry, perhaps. All things Chapter 2 highlights.
Precisely. That kind of diverse exposure right there in the university setting, let him experiment, refine things, get that real-time feedback, sort of. It's all building that foundation discussed in the chapter. The chapter even pulls out a specific lyric from his script for The Pot of Gold. My Little Salvation Army Queen.
Right. She was so seraphic
Yeah.
that she blocked the traffic when she beat that tambourine.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how the chapter connects this early lyric, from his Yale days
Yeah.
to the influences that would shape his later signature style.
It really does. Chapter 2 points out how even here, you kind of see the seeds of that playful mix, highbrow language, common subject. Like Gilbert,
Gilbert and Sullivan.
Exactly. The chapter specifically mentions Porter admired Sullivan's music and Gilbert's pointed humor and caustic wit, especially those patter songs, the list songs.
And you can totally see that thread as Chapter 2 lays it out, leading to later hits like You're the Top, From Anything
A
Go.
real classic list song.
Yeah. Or the wordplay in the
Yeah.
position. Those seeds were definitely planted back at Yale, which is what Chapter 2 is exploring here. The puns, the double meanings, it was developing.
It really underscores that idea, central to this chapter, that artistic voices evolve, right? They draw on influences. Okay, so shifting gears slightly, Chapter 2 also gives us a snapshot of the broader musical theater world around 1913.
Right, when he was graduating Yale.
Yeah.
A key moment in this chapter's timeline. So what did Broadway look like then, according to Chapter 2?
Well, interestingly, operettas were still pretty dominant. The chapter says out of 34 musicals on Broadway, 13 were operettas. Only 11 were American book musicals.
Wow, okay. So a very different scene than maybe we think of today. Puts his ambitions, discussed in this chapter, into context, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But then Chapter 2 points to a big turning point, World War I.
All right.
The war basically caused a huge drop in European shows coming to Broadway, and that created this, necessity for American talent to step up. a major shift impacting Porter's path, still in these early stages covered by the chapter.
So a massive opportunity opening up for American writers and composers, as Chapter 2 suggests.
Precisely. And the chapter also mentions vaudeville, burlesque, reviews gaining popularity around then too, so a shift towards more vernacular entertainment.
More American-sounding stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The chapter cites Jerome Kern moving away from European traditions and P.G. Wodehouse writing lyrics influenced by Gilbert and Sullivan. It's all part of this changing landscape that Porter, with his own GNS leanings from Yale, was stepping into, as detailed right here in Chapter 2.
Okay, so Porter's coming out of Yale, as Chapter 2 shows, into this evolving scene. The chapter then follows him post-Yale, right? Still within its scope.
Yes, it does. Chapter 2 tracks his move to Harvard's graduate school, supposedly to major in music.
Supposedly.
Well, the chapter makes it pretty clear his privileged lifestyle continued thanks to his grandfather's allowance, and apparently partying often won out over academics.
Okay, some things don't change. But Chapter 2 also notes his social circle was important right after Yale, too.
Hugely important, yeah. His connections with wealthy, influential friends were key, the chapter says, to keeping him engaged, staving off boredom or ennui. And it was through this network, according to the chapter, that he met Elizabeth Bessie Marbury.
Bessie Marbury. Chapter 2 flags her as significant a Broadway producer, an agent, an early supporter.
A really key figure in getting his work seen, Chapter 2 emphasizes. She produced his show See America First in 1916.
Okay, his first Broadway shot.
Seems like it. But Chapter 2 notes it had a very short run. Apparently, reviewers found his love lyrics, quote, unimpressive.
Ouch. Does the chapter give an example of these lyrics?
It does. It quotes, "Ah, worse than death, the plight of heart for heart repining, and from far thou dost bring on magical wing a memory ever dearest."
Yeah, that sounds
Pretty conventional, right? Especially compared to his later stuff. It's a contrast the chapter implicitly sets up.
definitely. But Chapter 2 still calls this show a springboard to greater things for him. Even failures can be steps forward, I guess.
That's exactly how the chapter frames it. And it continues, showing he came back to Broadway in 1919 with a review called Hitchikoo.
Okay.
Again, it closed early. But the chapter notes, his songs were recognized as being clever. So some progress there.
And wasn't there one song from that show that did okay?
Yeah.
Chapter 2 mentions one.
Yes. Old Fashioned Garden. Chapter 2 describes it as, like, a classic Tin Pan Alley tune, very nostalgic, appealing to American tastes at the time.
A different style for him then, during this period covered by the chapter.
Totally different. The chapter quotes, "One summer day I chanced to stray to a garden of flowers blooming wild." You know, that kind of thing.
Sentimental.
Very. A far cry from the sophisticated wit later on. But Chapter 2 points out this more traditional song had a really significant personal benefit for Porter.
Ah, right. His grandfather.
Exactly. The success of Old Fashioned Garden, as this section of the chapter concludes, finally convinced his grandfather to accept his career choice. And that led to a trust fund being set up.
Wow, so even that less characteristic song was crucial, as Chapter 2 shows, in giving him the financial freedom to keep going.
Absolutely vital, according to the chapter. It secured his path, in a way.
Okay, so wrapping up our look just at Chapter 2, it feels like his early Broadway attempts were definitely challenging. But those experiences, plus the foundation from Yale, all within this chapter's time frame in the changing theater scene, they were all essential pieces. He was beckoning Broadway, like the title says, even if it took Broadway a little while to fully embrace him back. That tension is clear in this chapter.
Exactly. Chapter 2 really lays out those crucial first steps, the development of his style influenced by GNS, but also adapting to that shift towards an American sound. It's the groundwork for everything that came later, all established right here.
So stepping back just from this Chapter 2 deep dive, the key takeaways really seem to be those Yale years were critical for his skills. The Gilbert and Sullivan influence was huge. His first tries on Broadway were tough, but taught him things, and eventually got his grandfather on board. And the whole musical theater world was shifting, creating an opening. All these pieces laid out in Chapter 2 set the stage.
Yeah, Chapter 2 functions perfectly as that foundation. It shows the early efforts, the developing voice, even if it wasn't fully formed yet in those first shows. It's all about laying that groundwork.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How did these specific early experiences, the successes and the setbacks, described just in Chapter 2, how did they really forge his determination and shape that incredibly unique style he became known for later? What parts of this early period covered in this chapter do you think were most vital for his eventual triumphs?
That's a great question to ponder. Keeping the focus just on this chapter, it really throws a spotlight on that complex mix, formal training, who you know socially, and just the cold, hard reality of trying to make it in the professional theater world. It's something to really mull over based on the journey chapter 2 outlines.